March 19, 1919, 12:15 in the morning. Every dance hall in New Orleans was packed. Every cafe, every bar. Jazz music poured from nearly every house in the city. Professional bands, amateur bands, people who'd never touched an instrument in their lives were banging on pots and pans, creating noise, creating rhythm, creating anything that sounded like jazz. Because 3 days earlier, the Times-Picayune had published a letter from someone claiming to be a demon from hell, and he'd promised to kill again that night, unless you were playing jazz music. The entire city had turned into one massive, desperate party, and nobody knew if it would be enough to save them. But to understand how New Orleans reached this point, we need to go back 10 months earlier, to a quiet night in May 1918, when a grocer named Joseph Maggio closed his shop and went to bed next to his wife Catherine. Neither of them knew they had hours left to live. Joseph and Catherine Maggio were Italian immigrants. They ran a small grocery store on the corner of Upper Line and Magnolia Streets. They lived in the apartment above the shop. Quiet people, hardworking, well-liked in their neighborhood. Catherine was 49 years old. Joseph was 64. They'd been married for decades, built a life together in New Orleans, thought they were safe. On the night of May 22, 1918, they went to sleep like any other night. The shop was locked. The apartment was secure. Joseph's brothers, Jake and Andrew, lived nearby. Everything was normal, routine, safe. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, something changed. Someone approached the back door of the Maggio grocery. They brought a chisel. They worked quietly, carefully, removing a wooden panel from the door, creating an opening just big enough to reach through, to unlock the door from the inside, to enter. They moved through the shop, into the apartment, into the bedroom where Joseph and Catherine slept. What happened next was brutal beyond description. The killer cut their throats, both of them with a straight razor. Joseph's throat was slashed deep. Catherine's throat was cut so viciously that her head was nearly severed from her shoulders, but the killer wasn't finished. They picked up an axe, Joseph's own axe, from the shop, and they struck both victims, multiple times, crushing their skulls, splattering blood across the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. At 6:30 in the morning, Joseph's brothers Jake and Andrew arrived to help open the shop. They knocked on the door. No answer. They called out. Nothing. They used their key to enter. They found Joseph first, still alive. Barely, blood everywhere. He tried to speak. Couldn't. He pointed toward the bedroom, toward Catherine. Then he collapsed. He died minutes later. Andrew ran for help. Jake stayed with the bodies, trying to process what he was seeing, trying to understand how this could have happened. When the police arrived, they found a scene that made no sense. The back door had been chiseled open, professional work, careful, methodical, but nothing was stolen. Money and valuables were left untouched. This wasn't robbery. This was something else, something worse. Near the apartment, someone found a message, written in chalk on the sidewalk. It read, "Mrs. Maggio is going to sit up tonight just like Mrs. Tony." Mrs. Tony, the officers knew that name. Mrs. Anthony Sciambra, an Italian grocer who'd been murdered 6 years earlier, in 1912, along with several other Italian grocers. Brutal attacks, axe murders, panels chiseled from doors. The killer had been called the Cleaver, never caught, never identified. The murders stopped in 1912 and everyone assumed the killer had died, or left New Orleans, or stopped. But now someone was leaving messages about Mrs. Tony, connecting these new murders to the old ones, like they were proud of it, Like they wanted people to know this was the same killer, or someone inspired by them, or someone who'd been waiting 6 years to start again. The investigation went nowhere. The police questioned Andrew. How could he sleep through a violent murder happening in the next room? Why didn't he hear anything? But they let him go. No evidence, no motive, just a grieving brother who'd found his family butchered. New Orleans was shaken, but not terrified, not yet. This was one incident, horrible, tragic, but isolated. People told themselves it was personal, a vendetta, something specific to the Maggio family, nothing to do with anyone else. They were wrong. 6 weeks later, on June 27th, a baker named John Zanka went to make a delivery to a grocery store owned by Louis Besumer, a Polish immigrant who'd been in New Orleans for years. He lived behind the store with a woman named Harriet Lowe. Though they claimed to be married, they weren't. But in 1918, people kept those details quiet. Zanka knocked on the back door, no answer. He tried the handle, unlocked. He pushed it open and found Louis Besumer and Harriet Lowe on the floor, covered in blood, both alive, barely. The back door had a panel removed, chiseled out just like the Maggio house. An axe was on the floor, covered in blood, their blood. The attack followed the same pattern, the same method, the same violence. Besumer survived. Lowe survived initially, but she was dying. Her skull was fractured, brain damage. The doctors tried to operate, failed. She lingered for weeks, in and out of consciousness, making wild accusations. First she said Besumer attacked her. Then she said he was a German spy. World War I was still raging. Paranoia was everywhere. The police arrested Besumer, found letters in German and Russian in his house, held him for 2 days, released him when they realized the spy theory was nonsense. Then Lowe changed her story again, said it was the Axeman, a dark figure, heavyset, she couldn't see his face, he'd broken in, attacked them both, then disappeared. She died in August. On her deathbed, she accused Besumer one final time. He was arrested, charged with murder, spent 9 months in prison before a jury acquitted him. 10-minute deliberation. Not guilty, but his life was destroyed, his business ruined, his reputation gone. And the Axeman was still out there. On August 5, 1918, a pregnant woman named Anna Schneider woke to find a dark figure standing over her bed. 8 months pregnant, 3 children sleeping nearby. The figure raised something, a lamp from her bedside table, brought it down on her skull, again and again and again. Her screams woke the neighbors. They came running, found her on the floor, blood pouring from her head. Her scalp opened, but alive. She survived, the baby survived, but she couldn't identify the attacker, couldn't describe them, just darkness, just violence, just terror. Some investigators doubted this was the Axeman. The attack didn't fit the pattern perfectly. No chiseled door panel, no axe, but the victims were still Italian grocers, still immigrants, still attacked in their beds while sleeping. The attacks continued. August 10th, Steve Boca, a grocer, attacked while sleeping, woke to find a dark figure with an axe standing over him. His skull was cracked open. He somehow ran to his neighbor's house, collapsed, survived, but couldn't remember details, couldn't describe the attacker. The police were baffled. They had no suspects, no witnesses who could identify anyone, no physical evidence linking the crimes. Every attack followed a similar pattern, but with just enough variation to create doubt. Were these all the same person, or multiple killers, or copycat crimes inspired by the first murder? New Orleans was terrified. People started sleeping in shifts. One family member staying awake all night, watching, listening, guns loaded, axes hidden, everyone waiting for the sound of a chisel against their back door. The Italian immigrant community was especially frightened. Most victims were Italian grocers. That wasn't random. That meant something. But what? Was this the Black Hand, the mafia, some kind of organized extortion scheme? But nothing was ever stolen. No ransom demands, no threats, just violence, just death. Superintendent Frank Mooney, head of the New Orleans police, had a different theory. He told reporters this wasn't organized crime. This was something worse. A fiend, he called it, a degenerate, someone with a Jekyll and Hyde personality, like Jack the Ripper, someone who killed because they had to, because an impulse overtook them, because they couldn't stop themselves. In other words, a serial killer, though that term wouldn't be coined for decades. But if Mooney was right, if this was a serial killer hunting Italian grocers, then nobody was safe. Because serial killers don't stop. They don't negotiate. They don't quit until they're caught. And this one showed no signs of slowing down. March 10, 1919, 7 months since the last confirmed attack. New Orleans had started to relax, started to believe maybe it was over. Maybe the Axeman had died, or moved away, or been arrested for something else. The murders had stopped. Life was returning to normal. Then the Axeman came to Gretna, a small town just across the Mississippi River from New Orleans, and he destroyed the Cortimiglia family. Charles and Rosie Cortimiglia were Italian grocers. They had a 2-year-old daughter named Mary. They lived behind their shop, just like the Maggios, just like the Besumers, just like all the others. On the night of March 9th, the Axeman chiseled out a panel on their back door, entered their home, found the family sleeping, and attacked with an axe. Rosie woke to the sound of her husband screaming, fighting. She saw a dark figure, heavy-set, wielding an axe. She grabbed Mary, tried to protect her. The axe came down, on Charles, on Rosie, on Mary. Charles survived, badly injured, skull fractured, but alive. Rosie survived, also badly injured, but alive. Mary did not, 2 years old, killed by an axe to the head while her mother held her. The neighbors found them, heard the screaming, called the police. By the time officers arrived, the Axeman was gone. The back door panel was removed. The axe was on the floor, nothing stolen, the pattern held. But the Gretna police didn't believe in serial killers. They believed in vendettas, in personal grudges, in neighbors who hated each other. And the Cortimiglias had neighbors who fit that description. Orlando Giordano and his 18-year-old son Frank lived next door. Also grocers, business competitors. There'd been disputes, arguments, a lawsuit. The Gretna police decided this was simple. The Giordanos had attacked the Cortimiglias. Case solved. They arrested both men, father and son, charged them with murder. Rosie Cortimiglia, still recovering from her injuries, backed up the police theory. She said the Giordanos had done it. She'd seen them, both of them, Frank holding the axe, Orlando watching. Charles disagreed. He said it wasn't the Giordanos. He said it was the Axeman, a stranger, someone who'd broken in, but the police ignored him. They had Rosie's testimony. They had motive. They had suspects. That was enough. The trial was a disaster. The evidence was circumstantial. The timeline didn't make sense, but the jury convicted them anyway. Orlando was sentenced to hang. Frank was sentenced to life in prison. They were innocent. Everyone who understood the Axeman pattern knew it, but Gretna wanted its case closed, and Rosie Cortimiglia, traumatized and broken by her daughter's death, needed someone to blame. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, something strange was happening. On March 13, 1919, the Times-Picayune received a letter. The return address said Hell. It was addressed to esteemed mortal, and it was signed the Axeman. The editors didn't know what to do with it. Was it real? A hoax? A sick joke? They waited 2 days, debated, finally decided to publish it on March 16th, 3 days before the deadline the letter mentioned. The letter read, "They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a fell demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman." It continued with mockery, with threats, with promises of more death. The writer claimed to be supernatural, a demon, an angel of death, close friends with Satan himself. But then it took a bizarre turn. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. Jazz music. The letter was demanding jazz music. Play jazz and live. Don't play jazz and die. It sounded insane, theatrical, like something from a novel, but people were terrified because the Axeman was real. The murders were real, and nobody knew if this letter was real too. March 19th was St. Joseph's Day, a major feast day for the Italian community, a day of celebration, of thanksgiving, of parties and food and family. It fell during Lent that year, a welcome break from fasting. Already people had plans to gather, to celebrate. Now they had new plans. Jazz everywhere all night. The dance halls prepared. The cafes stocked extra alcohol. The bars hired bands. Anyone who could play an instrument was suddenly in demand, and people who couldn't play just made noise, banging, drumming, anything that might pass for jazz. The day before, March 18th, the city was buzzing with nervous energy. Some people thought it was ridiculous, a hoax, fear-mongering. Others took it deadly seriously, bought instruments, organized parties, warned their neighbors. Superintendent Mooney told the press he didn't believe the letter was genuine. He thought it was someone trying to create panic, or sell newspapers, or play a cruel joke. But he also said the police would be on high alert, ready for anything. That night, March 18th going into March 19th, New Orleans transformed. Every street had music. Every block had noise. The sound of jazz filled the air, from elegant ballrooms to shotgun houses, from professional musicians to families with pots and pans. It was celebration and desperation and defiance all mixed together. And when midnight passed, when 12:15 came and went, when the night continued without a single attack, people started to believe maybe it had worked. Maybe the jazz had saved them. Maybe the demon had been appeased. Or maybe the letter had been a hoax all along, a cruel joke that had terrified an entire city, and they'd all fallen for it. A local composer named Joseph John Davila saw an opportunity. He wrote a song called The Mysterious Axeman's Just Don't Scare Me Papa. The sheet music cover showed a panicked family playing instruments, trying to ward off the Axeman. It sold well. People bought it, played it, kept it as a souvenir of the strangest night in New Orleans history. But was the letter real? Historians debate it. The writing shows sophistication, education, references to classical mythology, the warmth of my native Tartarus, Jack the Ripper-style theatricality. Would a working-class serial killer write like that? Some think Joseph Davila wrote it himself, to promote his song, to make money off fear. Others think it was a newspaper prank, to boost circulation, to create a story. But there's another possibility. What if the Axeman really did write it? What if he was educated, literate? What if he'd read about Jack the Ripper? What if he wanted to be famous, to be remembered, to create terror that would last beyond his crimes? What if he was playing with them, testing how far he could push an entire city, watching them dance and play music in fear, enjoying the power? We'll never know, because the Axeman never wrote again, never confirmed or denied the letter, just went back to what he did best: killing. The jazz night had bought New Orleans a reprieve, but it didn't buy them safety. On August 10, 1919, 5 months after the letter, the Axeman struck again. Steve Boca, a grocer, sleeping in his bedroom. The back door had been chiseled, a panel removed. The axe came from his own home. Boca woke to find a dark figure standing over him, felt the axe come down, felt his skull crack open, but somehow he stayed conscious. Somehow he ran out of his room, out of his house, to his neighbor Frank Genus's home. He collapsed there, blood pouring from his head. Genusa called the police, called an ambulance. Boca survived, but like all the survivors, he couldn't remember details, couldn't describe the attacker, just darkness, just pain, just the axe. 3 weeks later, September 3, 1919, Sarah Lawman, a young woman living alone, her neighbors heard something, checked on her, found her unconscious, head injuries, an axe nearby, the same pattern, the same method. She survived, but couldn't identify anyone, couldn't help the investigation. The Axeman had struck again and vanished again, and nobody knew anything more than before. The final victim was Mike Pepitone. October 27, 1919, a grocer, Italian immigrant, father of 6 children. He lived above his shop with his wife and children. That night his wife heard something, went to check on Mike, found him in bed. The axe had already fallen. Multiple times his skull was crushed, blood everywhere. She screamed. The children came running. They saw the dark figure, running, escaping through the back door, too fast to catch, too fast to identify. Mike Pepitone died, the Axeman's final confirmed victim. 6 people dead, at least 6 more injured, 18 months of terror, and then nothing. The attack stopped, completely. No more chiseled doors, no more midnight attacks, no more axes, no more blood. The Axeman simply disappeared. New Orleans waited, weeks, months, years, but he never came back, never struck again, never sent another letter, just vanished as mysteriously as he'd appeared. The police never stopped investigating. They had suspects, theories, possibilities, but no proof, no evidence, no arrests. Then in December 1920, something strange happened. In LA, far from New Orleans, a woman named Esther Albano shot a man named Joseph Mumford on a busy street, in broad daylight, in front of witnesses. She was arrested immediately, charged with murder, and she confessed. But she claimed she had a reason. She claimed Joseph Mumford was the Axeman of New Orleans, the man who'd killed her husband, Mike Pepitone. She said she'd recognized him, running from her bedroom that night in October 1919. She'd never forgotten his face, spent a year searching for him, found him in LA and killed him. The police looked into her story. Joseph Mumford had a criminal record. He'd been in and out of prison. The dates were interesting. He'd been imprisoned from 1912 to 1918, exactly when the Cleaver murders stopped and before the Axeman murders began. He was released in 1918, right when the Axeman attacks started. He left New Orleans after the Pepitone murder, right when the attacks stopped. Was Esther Albano right? Was Joseph Mumford the Axeman? The problem is, researchers have tried to verify this story. They've searched prison records, death certificates, news archives, and they can't find any evidence that Joseph Mumford existed. No records, no documentation, nothing. Some historians think Esther Albano made him up, killed someone else, a lover, a business partner, and created the Axeman story to justify it. She was convicted of murder, but her sentence was light, 10 years. She served 3 and was released. If Joseph Mumford was real, why can't we find any records? If he was the Axeman, why didn't the police investigate more thoroughly? Why didn't they connect him to the other murders? Maybe the records were lost. Maybe they were destroyed. Maybe Mumford used aliases. Maybe the whole thing is true but undocumented. Or maybe it's an urban legend, a story that grew in the telling, a neat ending to a case that never had one. Because the truth is, we don't know who the Axeman was. We don't know why he targeted Italian grocers. We don't know why he used their own axes. We don't know why he chiseled door panels instead of breaking in other ways. We don't know why nothing was stolen. We don't know why he stopped. Some theories suggest organized crime, the Black Hand, extortion rackets targeting Italian immigrants, but there were no ransom demands, no payment requests, just violence. Some theories suggest racism, anti-Italian sentiment, prejudice turned murderous, but why grocers specifically? Why that method? Why stop? Some theories suggest mental illness, a sexual sadist, someone who targeted women primarily and killed men who got in the way. Several female victims survived. Several men died. That pattern suggests something. Some theories suggest it was multiple killers. The attacks varied slightly. Different weapons, different levels of violence. Maybe several people were inspired by the first murder. Maybe they were working together. Maybe they were competing. The truth is probably simpler, probably darker, probably one person who killed for reasons we'll never understand, who enjoyed the terror, who liked the power, who felt compelled to do it until the compulsion faded or circumstances changed. And then he stopped, and New Orleans slowly forgot, moved on. The jazz parties became legend. The letter became folklore. The Axeman became a ghost story, something to tell tourists, something to write songs about, something to remember but not really believe. But the families never forgot. The Maggios, the Cordamiglias, the Pepitones, they carried the weight, the loss, the unanswered questions. In 1920, after Rosie Cordamiglia's false testimony sent the Giordanos to prison, something broke inside her. Guilt, grief, the weight of what she'd done. She recanted. She admitted she'd lied. She said the Giordanos were innocent. She said she'd been wrong. The Giordanos were released, but their lives were destroyed, their reputation ruined. Orlando had spent months on death row. Frank had spent months in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Because a traumatized woman needed someone to blame and the police needed a conviction. The Axeman had destroyed more than just his direct victims. He destroyed families, neighborhoods, trust, safety, the feeling that you could go to sleep in your own home and wake up alive. New Orleans would never be quite the same. The jazz night became part of the city's identity, a moment when music had literally saved lives, or so people believed, or wanted to believe. It fit the narrative. Music City, Jazz City. Even a demon from hell couldn't resist the power of jazz. But was that true? Or was it just a hoax? Or was it the Axeman's final joke, making an entire city dance for him, making them believe they'd beaten him with music when really he was just done killing, when really he'd gotten bored or scared or satisfied or whatever drives a serial killer to stop? We'll never know, because the Axeman never told us, never got caught, never confessed, never left enough evidence to identify him, never gave New Orleans the closure it needed. He's still out there, not alive, almost certainly dead by now, but out there in the sense that we don't know who he was, where he went, why he killed, why he stopped. Just another mystery, another ghost, another piece of history that refuses to be fully understood. And maybe that's fitting, because New Orleans has always been a city of mysteries, of ghosts, of things that can't quite be explained. The Axeman fits right in. A demon who demanded jazz, who terrified a city, who vanished without a trace. Do you think it was one killer, or several? Do you think the letter was real? Do you think Joseph Mumford existed? Do you think the jazz really saved anyone? Or was it all just coincidence and fear and desperate hope? The answers died with the Axeman, whoever he was, wherever he went, whatever drove him to kill. All we have left are the questions, the stories, the legends, and the faint echo of jazz music playing desperately through the night, trying to keep the darkness away, trying to survive until morning, trying to believe that music could save us from monsters. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't, sometimes we never find out which. If stories like this matter to you, the ones with unanswered questions and details that never quite fit, consider subscribing. New true crime documentaries every week.